People always come up to me and ask me questions about very specific selling situations. They say, well, when a prospect says this, what should I do? Or if they push back at the close, what should I be doing? And the reality is, most of the reasons that we are facing challenges in our selling situations is because we're missing out on the basic principles of selling. It's almost like if you were to build a house and you were to build that house, but there's no foundation whatsoever. And so the house is wobbly, it's crooked, it's all to one side. Even if the house itself is beautiful, because it doesn't have that foundation, it never stands correctly. So in this video, I'm going to show you the 5 basic principles of selling. Check it out. Number 1, follow the data and not your gut. I would even take this further and say, I don't even trust anyone else's gut instinct when it comes to selling. The problem with sales is that there's so much information out there that is just based on some guru's gut instinct. Or maybe they had some selling success, so now they're sharing what they think is what led them to where they are today. But the problem with that is what got one person to be successful in one particular situation doesn't necessarily work in other situations. So a good example of that is the relationship salesperson. I've met a number of really successful relationship salespeople who just have built strong relationships over the course of their career, and as a result are actually pretty successful. And so then they go and tell people, they say, it's all about building relationships. You've got to get out there and build relationships. But you know what? In today's world of selling, the data shows that relationship salespeople on average are far less successful than top performers. So what we ultimately want to do is follow what the data tells us. We live in an unparalleled time in sales where we actually have so much more data on what actually works as opposed to what doesn't work. When you follow an approach, make sure that what it's based on is data and really what truly works in today's marketplace. Number 2, show insight up front. Now, a lot of people say, well, so do you mean that I need to educate all my prospects? No. We're not here to educate your prospects. Your prospects aren't your clients. You can educate clients, but what you want to do with prospects is demonstrate enough insight up front at the beginning of the selling situation that it causes that trigger to go off in their head where they're like, oh, okay, this person is at least worth my time to talk to. Because just put yourself in the shoes of your prospect. If your prospect gets an email from a salesperson and that email says, you know what, I'd love to learn more about your business so that way we can talk about how we can help you. If you're receiving that email, are you going to be really inspired to hop on a phone call? By the way, you've received 90 other emails like that in the past couple of days? Of course not, because that salesperson demonstrated no insight up front. And it's just as true if we're starting our conversation with that fancy pitch about our product or our offering. There's no insight. You could teach a monkey to do that. What we need to do is demonstrate real insight, and we all have it as salespeople because you've talked to so many different clients in the industries that you serve. And as a result, you have this powerful bird's eye view where you can actually show real insight and value up front that demonstrates that you know what you're talking about and may intrigue or actually lure the prospect into that conversation. And that's how you get that conversation going with real and useful insight in the eyes of your prospect. Number 3, drop the persuasion. If you go on Amazon right now and you type in the word persuasion, there are going to be millions of listings of books on persuasion, the art of persuasion, how to persuade anyone to do anything. All of these ideas that we've all been taught to think are really synonymous with sales. But the reality is, and the data shows, that great selling isn't about persuasion. Persuasion is this old school idea that you can somehow manipulate your prospect into agreeing with what you're saying as a result of some fancy use of your language. And the reality is that your prospects, if you're selling something that is actually useful to people who have money, your prospects are going to be smart. They're going to be savvy. They're going to have heard all of the persuasive arguments out there. And that's not what they need. They need an expert who can take them through a conversation to help them determine and to help you determine whether there's actually a fit. So the idea of persuasion is this super old school, cheesy 1980s approach to selling. And unfortunately, a lot of salespeople are doing it, whether they know it or not. Maybe they're still asking a couple of probing questions up front, but then they go right into the persuasion pitch. And we need to drop all of that because it's not going to work in today's world of selling. All that's going to happen is that your prospects are going to feel a lot of pressure, and as a result, the walls are going to go up and they will push back and they will run for the hills. Number 4, no more features and benefits. This is an extension of the idea of persuasion. You were probably taught to present your offering. There's a very good chance that you were taught to demonstrate features and benefits. So the feature of a computer is that it has a keyboard. The benefit is that you can put information into that computer. The feature of this light bulb is that it is a 350 watt light bulb. The benefit is that it is going to light an entire auditorium. This is the very simplistic idea that we need to basically demonstrate the feature of what we're offering and then share the benefit that it has for our prospect. But again, this is like that really old school 1980s approach to selling, where we're kind of almost assuming that prospects are a little bit dumb, and so they need to be translated to, here are the benefits. But the reality is your prospects don't care about your features and they don't need your benefits. What they need are solutions to their problems, to their challenges. So when we drop that persuasion, we drop those features and benefits and instead focus on determining whether the prospect is a fit and understanding what challenges that they're facing that maybe you can actually solve. And then your presentation is simply about demonstrating that you can actually solve those problems. That's how we avoid the whole old school feature and benefit approach in the first place. Number 5, next steps are everything. Now, this is really one of the most critical basics of selling that I can possibly think of. Yet so many salespeople simply miss this. And maybe it's because they knew it one time and then they just started to get sloppier, or maybe, we never just learned it in the first place. Have you ever been in a selling situation where everything was going well and the prospect says, you know what, this is great. Why don't you call me back next week and we can talk about next steps? And you say, yeah, and you go to your boss and you say, oh, I've got a good one. You put it in your pipeline and you say, this is a 95% chance of closing. And then you go to call next week and they don't answer. And you send them an email and they don't respond. And you call them again and you leave a voicemail and you don't get a call back. Before you know it, you start to get that creeping sensation that maybe I've lost this one. What happened? And that's one of the most frustrating situations that we can all enter into in selling. But the fatal mistake was not that we were doing something wrong in the follow-up, it's that we got ourselves into this situation of following up in the first place. We want to always establish clear next steps whenever we are dealing with a prospect. So that means in that meeting where the prospect says, you know what, why don't you follow up with me next week? Instead of saying, sure, you say, you know what, George, I really appreciate that. But actually, just to avoid the back and forth, would it make sense to get something on the calendar where we're both ready to talk about what those next steps might look like? And the prospect's like, sure. And now you have a calendar invite that goes out, they accept it, and now you are in the calendar and there is a scheduled next step. So there's no more of this following up. If you are following up in your selling situations, you're screwed. You've already put yourself at a disadvantage. I was telling a client just the other day, teaching people how to be more effective at follow-up is like teaching someone how to arm wrestle when their arm is already 2 inches off the table. It's like if you're already here, you're in trouble. Trying to get from here to here is a problem. You're not going to get there. So instead, just don't get your elbow into this situation. Make sure that you stay up and even. And one of the ways to do that is always have a clear and scheduled next step. So there are the 5 basic principles of selling. And if you enjoyed this video, then have an awesome free training on the data-driven approach to closing more sales in today's marketplace. Just click right here to get registered instantly. Seriously, just click right here. This is an in-depth training that will help you close more sales at higher prices, all while generating more meetings. Also, if you got some value, please like this video below on YouTube and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking my face that should be right about here to get access to a new video just like this one each week.